May 20. I've been fired from my job at the bakery. I know it was foolish of me to hang on to the past, but there was something about the place, with its white brick walls browned by oven heat. It was home to me. What did I do to make them hate me so? I can't blame Donner. He's got to think of his business and the other employees, and yet he's been closer to me than a father. He called me into his office, cleared the statements and bills off the solidarity chair beside his roll-top desk, and without looking up at me, he said, "I've been meaning to talk to you. Now is as good a time as any." It seems foolish now, but as I sat there staring at him, short, chubby, with the ragged light brown moustache comically drooping over his upper lip, it was as if both of me, the old Charlie and the new, were sitting on that chair, frightened at what old Mr. Donner was going to say. "Charlie, your Uncle Herman was a good friend of mine. I kept my promise to him to keep you on the job, good times and bad, so that you didn't ever want for $1 in your pocket and a place to lay your head without being put away in that home. The bakery is my home, and I treated you like my own son, who gave up his life for his country. And when Herman died, how old were you? 17? More like a 6-year-old boy. I swore to myself. I said, 'Arthur Donner, as long as you got a bakery and a business over your head, you're going to look after Charlie. He is going to have a place to work, a bed to sleep in, and bread in his mouth.' When they committed you to that Warren place, I told them how you would work for me, and I would take care of you. You didn't spend even one night in that place. I got you a room, and I looked after you. Now, have I kept that solemn promise?" I nodded, but I could see by the way he was folding and unfolding his bills that he was having trouble. And as much as I didn't want to know, I knew. I've tried my best to do a good job. I've worked hard. I know, Charlie, nothing's wrong with your work, but something happened to you, and I don't understand what it means. Not only me, everyone has been talking about it. I've had them in here a dozen times in the last few weeks. They are all upset, Charlie. I got to let you go." I tried to stop him, but he shook his head. "There was a delegation in to see me last night. Charlie, I got my business to hold together." He was staring at his hands, turning the paper over and over as if he hoped to find something on it that was not there before. "I'm sorry, Charlie. But where will I go?" He peered up at me for the first time since we'd talked into his cubbyhole office. You know as well as I do that you don't need to work here anymore. Mr. Donner, I have never worked anywhere else. Let's face it, you are not the Charlie who came in here 17 years ago, not even the same Charlie of 4 months ago. You haven't talked about it. It's your own affair. Maybe a miracle of some kind, who knows? But you've changed into a very smart young man, and operating the dough mixer and delivering packages is no work for a smart young man. He was right, of course, but something inside me wanted to make him change his mind. You've got to let me stay, Mr. Donner. Give me another chance. You said yourself that you promised Uncle Herman I would have a job here for as long as I needed it. Well, I still need it, Mr. Donner. You don't, Charlie. If you did, then I'd tell them I don't care about their delegations and their petitions, and I'd stick up for you against all of them. But as it is now, they're all scared to death of you. I got to think of my own family too. What if they change their minds? Let me try to convince them. I was making it harder for him than he expected. I knew I should stop, but I couldn't control myself. I'll make them understand, I pleaded. All right, he sighed finally. Go ahead, try, but you're only going to hurt yourself. As I came out of the office, Frank Riley and Joe Carp walked by me, and I knew what he had said was true. Having me around to look at was too much for them. I made them all uncomfortable. Frank had just picked up a tray of rolls, and both he and Joe turned when I called. Look, Charlie, I'm busy, maybe later. No, I insisted. Now, right now. Both of you have been avoiding me. Why? Frank, the fast talker, the ladies' man, the ranger, studied me for a moment and then set the tray down on the table. Why? I will tell you why. Because all of a sudden you're a big shot, a know-it-all, a brain. Now you're a regular whiz kid, an egghead, always with a book, always with all the answers. Well, I will tell you something. You think you're better than the rest of us here, okay? Go someplace else. But what did I do to you? What did he do? Hear that, Joe? I will tell you what you did, Mr. Gordon. You come pushing in here with your ideas and suggestions and make the rest of us all look like a bunch of dopes. But I will tell you something. To me, you are still a moron. Maybe I don't understand some of them big words or the names of the books, but I'm as good as you are. Better, even. Yeah, Joe nodded, turning to emphasize the point of Gimpy, who had just come up behind him. I'm not asking you to be my friends, I said, or have anything to do with me. Just let me keep my job. Mr. Donner says it's up to you. Gimpy glared at me and then shook his head in disgust. "You got a nerve," he shouted. "You can go to hell." Then he turned and limped off heavily. And so it went. Most of them felt the way Joe and Frank and Gimpy did. It had been all right as long as they could laugh at me and appear clever at my expense. But now they were feeling inferior to the moron. I began to see that by my astonishing growth I had made them shrink and emphasized their inadequacies. I had betrayed them, and they hated me for it. Fanny Burden was the only one who didn't think I should be forced to leave, and despite their pressure and threats, she had been the only one not to sign the petition. "Which don't mean to say," she remarked, "that I don't think there's something mighty strange about you, Charlie. The way you have changed, I don't know. You used to be a good, dependable man, ordinary, not too bright, maybe, but honest, and who knows what you've done to yourself to get so smart all of a sudden. Like everybody's been saying, it ain't right. But what's wrong with a person wanting to be more intelligent, to acquire knowledge and understand himself and the world? If you'd read your Bible, Charlie, you'd know that it's not meant for a man to know more than was given to him to know by the Lord in the first place. The fruit of that tree was forbidden to man. Charlie, if you'd done anything you wasn't supposed to, you know, like with the devil or something, maybe it ain't too late to get out of it. Maybe you could go back to being the good, simple man you was before." "There's no going back, Fanny. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm like a man born blind who has been given a chance to see light. That can't be sinful. Soon there will be millions like me all over the world. Science can do it, Fanny." She stared down at the bride and groom on the wedding cake she was decorating, and I could see her lips barely move as she whispered, "It was evil when Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge. It was evil when they saw they was naked and learned about lust and shame, and they was driven out of paradise, and the gates was closed to them. If not for that, none of us would have grown old and be sick and die." There was nothing more to say, to her or to the rest of them. None of them would look into my eyes. I can still feel the hostility. Before, they had laughed at me, despising me for my ignorance and dullness. Now they hated me for my knowledge and understanding. Why? What in God's name did they want of me? This intelligence has driven a wedge between me and all the people I knew and loved, driven me out of the bakery. Now I'm more alone than ever before. I wonder what would happen if they put Algernon back in the big cage with some of the other mice. Would they turn against him? May 25. So this is how a person can come to despise himself, knowing he's doing the wrong thing and not being able to stop. Against my will, I found myself drawn to Alice's apartment. She was surprised, but she let me in. "You are soaked. The water is streaming down your face." "It's raining. Good for the flowers." "Come on in. Let me get you a towel. You'll catch pneumonia." "You are the only one I can talk to," I said. "Let me stay. I've got a pot of fresh coffee on the stove. Go ahead and dry yourself, and then we can talk." I looked around while she went to get the coffee. It was the first time I had ever been inside her apartment. I felt a sense of pleasure, but there was something disturbing about the room. Everything was neat. The porcelain figurines were in a straight line on the window ledge, all facing the same way, and the throw pillows on the sofa hadn't been thrown at all, but were regularly spaced on the clear plastic covers that protected the upholstery. 2 of the end tables had magazines, neatly stacked so that the titles were clearly visible. On one table, The Reporter, The Saturday Review, The New Yorker. On the other, Mademoiselle, House Beautiful, and Reader's Digest. On the far wall, across from the sofa, hung an ornately framed reproduction of Picasso's Mother and Child, and directly opposite above the sofa was a painting of a dashing Renaissance couturier, masked, sword in hand, protecting a frightened, pink-cheeked maiden. Taken all together, it was wrong, as if Alice couldn't make up her mind who she was and which world she wanted to live in. "You haven't been to the lab for a few days," she called from the kitchen. "Professor Nemur is worried about you." "I couldn't face them," I said. "I know there's no reason for me to be ashamed, but it's an empty feeling not going into work every day, not seeing the shop, the ovens, the people. It's too much. Last night and the night before I had nightmares of drowning." She set the tray in the center of the coffee table, the napkins folded into triangles, and the cookies laid out in a circular display pattern. "You mustn't take it so hard, Charlie. It has nothing to do with you." It doesn't help to tell myself that. Those people, for all these years, were my family. It was like being thrown out of my own home. "That's just it," she said. "This has become a symbolic repetition of experiences you had as a child, being rejected by your parents, being sent away. Oh, Christ, never mind giving it a nice neat label. What matters is that before I got involved in this experiment, I had friends, people who cared for me. Now I'm afraid." "You've still got friends." "It's not the same. Fear is a normal reaction." "It's more than that. I've been afraid before, afraid of being strapped for not giving in to Norma, afraid of passing Howells Street, where the gang used to tease me and push me around. And I was afraid of the school teacher, Mrs. Libby, who tied my hands so I wouldn't fidget with things on my desk. But those things were real, something I was justified in being afraid of. This terror at being kicked out of the bakery is vague, a fear I don't understand. Get hold of yourself. You don't feel the panic. But Charlie, it's to be expected. You are a new swimmer forced off a diving raft and terrified of losing the solid wood under your feet. Mr. Donner was good to you, and you were sheltered all these years. Being driven out of the bakery this way is an even greater shock than you expected. Knowing it intellectually doesn't help. I can't sit alone in my room anymore. I wander into the streets at all hours of the day or night, not knowing what I'm looking for, walking until I'm lost, finding myself outside the bakery. Last night I walked all the way from Washington Square to Central Park, and I slept in the park. What the hell am I searching for? The more I talked, the more upset she became. What can I do to help you, Charlie? I don't know. I'm like an animal who's been locked out of his nice, safe cage. She sat beside me on the couch. They are pushing you too fast. You are confused. You want to be an adult, but there's still a little boy inside you, alone and frightened. She put my head on her shoulder, trying to comfort me, and as she stroked my hair, I knew that she needed me the way I needed her. Charlie, she whispered after a while, whatever you want, don't be afraid of me. I wanted to tell her I was waiting for the panic. Once, during a bakery delivery, Charlie had nearly fainted when a middle-aged woman just out of the bath amused herself by opening her bathrobe and exposing herself. Had he never seen a woman without clothes on? Did he know how to make love? His terror, his whining, must have frightened her because she clutched her robe together and gave him a quarter to forget what had happened. She was only testing him, she warned, to see if he was a good boy. He tried to be good, he told her, and not look at women, because his mother used to beat him whenever that happened in his pants. Now he had the clear picture of Charlie's mother, screaming at him, holding a leather belt in her hand, and his father trying to hold her back. Enough, Rose. You will kill him. Leave him alone. His mother straining forward to lash at him, just out of reach now, so that the belt swishes past his shoulder as he writhers and twists away from it on the floor. Look at him, Rose screams. He can't learn to read and write, but he knows enough to look at a girl that way. I'll beat the filth out of his mind. He can't help it if he gets an erection. It's normal. He didn't do anything. He's got no business to think that way about girls. A friend of his sister's comes to the house and he starts thinking like that. I'll teach him so he never forgets. Do you hear? If you ever touch a girl, I will put you away in a cage like an animal for the rest of your life. Do you hear me? I still hear her. But perhaps I had been released. Maybe the fear and nausea was no longer a sea to drown in, but only a pool of water reflecting the past alongside the now. Was I free? If I could reach Alice in time, without thinking about it before it overwhelmed me, maybe the panic wouldn't happen. If only I could make my mind a blank. I managed to choke out, You do it. Hold me. And before I knew what she was doing, she was kissing me, holding me closer than anyone had ever held me before. But at the moment I should have come closest of all, it started, the buzzing, the chill, the nausea. I turned away from her. She tried to soothe me, to tell me it didn't matter, that there was no reason to blame myself. But ashamed, and no longer able to control my anguish, I began to sob. There in her arms I cried myself to sleep, and I dreamed of the courtier and the pink-cheeked maiden. But in my dream it was the maiden who held the sword.